So, it's already April, and I'm kind of concerned by that, but this entire year I was planning to make a video on 2023 and just never found the time to do so. But I think it's time we change that. In 2023, I got around 40 anime figures. Most were bought, a few were gifts, and a handful I have yet to talk about on this channel. And this won't be the video that I highlight those for you guys. But today I would like to go back and look at my favorite anime pickups of the year, and maybe a few of my least favorite as well. I'm also going to be taking a look at the aftermarket prices on some of these, just for curiosity's sake. But yeah, this should be fun. Let's begin. Alright, so I got a top 5 for you, but before we get there, I want to really quickly highlight two figures that could have been in my top 5, but weren't actually mine. I was borrowing them just to make content for this channel. So I feel like they're kind of disqualified from my personal ranking. However, I think both are very noteworthy releases, and I kind of just want to pad out this video with a few more figures if possible, considering there were so many releases in 2023. So, first up is the Hokusai swimsuit version by Good Smile Company. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the footage of this figure anymore. This was before I was using the DSLR over there, and I don't know, I must have deleted it or something. I typically don't do that. Normally, I'm stockpiling all of my footage in case for reasons like this, but since it's not my figure, I can't do anything right now, so the footage is limited for this section, so I'm gonna keep it brief. I really like this one. I'm not gonna say it's her best figure or anything, just because there's that luxury line Fat Company figure, which is definitely more of like a stunner. You know, when you see that one with the crashing wave behind her and the really pretty kimono that she was wearing, I get it. That figure is probably more impressive just from a visual standpoint. However, I feel like the Good Smile Company one is a bit more refined, just like with her face and the colors. I feel like it's a much more pretty and vibrant palette, and I just love the fusion of modern and traditional with this like weird gotcha swimsuit that she's wearing. It's really like the most impractical thing out there, but you know, that's kind of what sells, these like really flashy designs. The only thing that kind of sucks about it is the assembly, which was such a tedious procedure. Not only putting it together, but when I had to put it back in the box, it was just as hard. But yeah, just all those like different patterns on the sashes and the stickers that are lining the sheaths of the katanas, I think it's awesome to look at. And like I said, she's very pretty. I think her face is better than the Fat Company one. And not to mention, this is very cheap now. I think I've seen it for as low as like 18,000 yen. Definitely dropped very hard on the aftermarket. The other figure I want to highlight in this section is none other than the Makise Kurisu reading Steiner version, also from Good Smile Company. Now, it wouldn't surprise me at all if like half you guys watching this video already own this figure, because it was an extremely popular release, and for good reason too. It is beautiful. The composition and the execution just kind of made this the definitive Kurisu figure to get. And it's not like she didn't have good figures in the past. There were a lot of fantastic ones. But right now, this is the one to beat, and I feel like we're not going to beat it for a very long time, if ever. But yeah, this figure is just so cool, you know, representing both the series and the character in such a flawless manner. I love the art that this figure was based on. They had to change things up a little bit, because originally she was in this room just like full of monitors, but now it's more of like a stack. But the stack is very like, I don't know, chaotic, because they're all stacked on top of each other. Monitors, computers, paperwork, stuff like that. Not to mention all of those wires, which I think really helps add to the chaos. It's such a neat visual to me, like the base just can't contain all of this stuff, so it starts to seep out of the composition. I don't know why that's just so eye-catching to me, but I love that detail. And Kurisu also just looks fantastic here. I love her expression, I love her pose. I think the paint job is like 95% there. The only thing I don't love about this figure is her jacket, which doesn't look that bad. I just feel like it looks a little bit cheaper than literally everything else, including the rest of her outfit. Just something about that like sorta shiny appearance to it. It's not really glossy, but I don't know, it just wasn't like the right finish that I think they should have went with. I have to imagine if you are a fan of Steins Gate, then you at least considered picking this one up. The only reason I feel like you wouldn't is because of its pretty expensive retail price. I think it was around like 30 to 35,000 yen. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I do know that this figure is actually pretty hard to find on the aftermarket. There were none listed on AmiAmi when I looked, and the only one I could find was on like Mercari JP for like 50,000 yen. But I gotta imagine this is one of those figures that's only going to continue to rise in price. But I also feel like at the same time, Good Smile Company will eventually re-release this, but I don't think they're in a rush to do so. because this was a pretty big project just, based on the sculpt. So hopefully you can find the deal that you want out there if you're not, willing to wait. Alright, so let's finally take a look at my list. If you follow this channel, you probably know what my top picks are going to be. However, I'd be very surprised if you guessed 4 and 5. In fact, I'm kind of surprised 5 is on this list, but I could not deny its quality and its appeal. So, number 5 is going to go to MX Sean by Max Factory. She was very expensive when she initially was put up for pre-order, about 28,000 yen, something like that. She's a 1/7 scale. And at that price, I know a lot of people were like checked out at that point. It was way too much for them, and I don't blame them for it. That is a very hefty price tag. However, now you can get her for around like 20 to 23 on like the pre-owned section on AmiAmi, which I think is a lot better. But yeah, let's not beat around the bush. The appeal of this figure is very apparent as soon as you look at her. I'm not even really sure what she's wearing. It has like a very sporty vibe to it. There's like a sleeveless hoodie there, but she's also wearing a bit of a leotard with like a sheer material. And man, if you put her next to like any other 1/7 scale, her thighs are going to look so much bigger. It is crazy how thick she is in some areas, right? I do like how toned she is with her legs, a little bit in the abdomen as well. But man, just this mix of like this super cute moe face and then this like dynamite, super voluptuous body. I don't know, man, it just works. It just works for me. Tori Domino does that all the time. He did it with Ryza. He does it with like all of his OCs. But this time, it just feels like Max Factory was like, hey, do whatever you want. We don't care. Just make something attractive. And he was like, all right, bet. And he just made like his most curvy design yet. That's probably not true, but I haven't seen all of his work. And this one's pretty outrageous with the proportions. But yeah, I gotta say, Max Factory did an excellent job here. The paintwork is flawless. I love the color palette of this figure. And the sculpting is just as good. Like the creases in her clothing, as little as there is. And I love like the flow of her ponytail, the gold highlights on like the logo on the chest and whatnot, the bands around her thighs. It's all real eye-catching. I still do wonder though what her outfit's like all about. I said it was sporty and I'm gonna stick with that. Part of me feels like because she's wearing heels that she might be like a race queen or something like that, which would make sense to me. And I still have no idea what's in that case. It might be a weapon. They never told us. It's just a case that she leans against, and it kind of makes her look a little bit cooler, but it's still a little bit mysterious. So, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But this design's great. Take advantage of the fact that she's like way cheaper now if you like this design. I don't know why I pointed back there. I think it's because she's like right there. I don't know. Okay, so number 4. I feel like this one's not going to be as surprising. She is very popular, and I think the figure kind of speaks for itself. When you see it, you're gonna understand. We're talking about Marine from Hololive by Max Factory, not the Figma, the big one, the 1/7 scale. Now, initially, I wasn't even going to get this figure. I just kind of wrote it off because she was pretty damn expensive at about 29,000 yen, and it looked very big. I wasn't even sure where I was going to put this, but as soon as she was released and I saw photos of her, I just felt like I had to get this. I had immense guilt and regrets, so I kind of rushed to find like somewhere that still had her. I feel like I'm very confident in saying that this is the best Hololive figure, regardless of if she's your favorite or not. I just feel like I have not seen one as impressive as this yet. There's a lot of good ones, don't get me wrong, but kind of like the Kurisu figure, it really comes down to the composition and the idea. I love that it's not just Marine, but she's got this massive anchor and this like equally massive chain behind her, not to mention the billowing of her coat. It's just such an impressive figure to look at. But then you gotta remember that it's Max Factory making this figure, and like the quality of the paint, all that like nice metallic red and gold running throughout her outfit looks so good. The paint of her hair, the shading is perfect. And I just love the sense of flow that they've captured within the sculpt. Everything's just moving about, her jacket, the skirt, the hair, the tail of the hat. It's all just so nice to look at. It looks like a very windy day out there, but it really just makes the sculpt a little bit more dynamic despite how she's kind of just like sitting on this anchor. Also, I have to imagine that Marine had a lot of say in how this figure was designed, specifically her pose. I could very easily visualize her asking the team to make her like as sexy as possible, and the team just being like, hell yeah, we love you, let's do it. Because my god, is this a very attractive pose, And body sculpt, like her thighs look amazing. I think her butt is very curvy, but it's kind of like deformed slightly so that she could sit on the anchor. Stomach is very defined, right? And I love her expression too. It's got a bit of like seductiveness to it. You know, you're gonna need a little bit of shelf space for her, but she is more than worth it if you ask me. Unfortunately, she has risen on the aftermarket, though not by too much, which is actually a little surprising considering her popularity and the quality of this figure. I think on AmiAmi right now, I saw some B+ grades for about 35,000 yen, which isn't too bad if you ask me, but she is a pretty big figure and the box was also massive. So we're looking at like 8,000 to 11,000 EMS, not exactly sure. So consider that if you do decide to pick her up, it's gonna cost you a little bit more than it used to. So before we get into our top 3, I thought now would be the perfect time to talk about my least favorite figures of 2023. Now, as somebody who's been collecting for quite a while, I'm not somebody who is just going to like jump at anything that looks good. I'm very picky, so the likelihood of me getting something that I just outright hate is very low. However, there was one this year that really got on my nerves, and I never got a chance to talk about it on this channel. I was going to, but I scrapped it from a video. However, before we get there, let me talk about a couple of extra figures that weren't necessarily bad, but for one reason or another, I just didn't love as much as I wanted to. For instance, the only figure that I sold this year that I also bought this year was Pine from Bomber Girl by Wing. This is the swimsuit version, a 1/6 scale. I think she was like 22,000 yen, something like that. Just wasn't really impressed by this one. Her skin was a bit rough to the touch for some reason. Her faceplates looked a little bit weird to me, especially the default faceplate. And the bikini, while the color was fine, just wasn't like super eye-catching. So I let it go. I have the other Pine figure, which by the way, both of them hit the bin like really hard, especially the Wave one, which is my preferred figure. You can get that for like 10,000 yen. I think the swimsuit version is closer to around like 15,000. But yeah, not really a swimsuit figure guy. I kind of just like impulsively bought that one, and then when I wasn't impressed, I let it go. Next up, let's talk about a figure that I made a video about, and I always get comments on it periodically, just because of like the title of the video. We're talking about the Taiga Tiger version from Freeing. Now, if you recall that video, I think I titled it something like I'm a little disappointed in Taiga's new figure. And that's still true. I feel like I get yelled at and people get mad at me just because I have a slightly negative opinion on something that I still didn't hate. Like, reviews shouldn't be black and white, you know what I mean? Like, it's not I love this or I hate this. This figure's amazing or it's trash. There's levels to this. I'm allowed to criticize things about it. The figure was like 30,000 yen, and I felt like the bunny version was a little bit better. I felt like the execution of the bunny version left less to complain about, and I think that is a very solid figure. The tiger version, for me, had a couple of flaws with it. The hair was starting to crack, which was the worst part. Her tail had like yellow paint on the black portions, which was like very sloppy. I think I put a Sharpie to it just because I didn't want to look at it anymore. And I felt like the shade of her hair was like slightly off too for some reason. And then they also changed the fishnets to not be as dark as they were advertised, and were just like the normal tights and fishnets that Freeing always uses. It's really not a bad figure. In fact, the idea of it is better than the bunny version. And I feel like as somebody who adores Toradora, loves Taiga, I'm allowed to be critical about a character and a series that I really like. It's not even like a hot take to criticize Freeing. I feel like everybody does it to the point where it's now been normalized to just kind of shit on them. And they're not even that bad. It's just that their stuff is kind of overpriced for what it is. This figure, the tiger version and the bunny version, are cheaper now than when they released because they made so many of them. And now there's the bare leg bunny version and the bare leg tiger version, which I'm going to talk about in the pre-order roundup. Actually, I don't even want to. What is there to talk about in that video? They're making 4 versions of this figure, 2 lacking a feature of the other 2. It's like, why get excited about that? Especially when you're going to have to pay more for it. Just does not make any sense to me. If you like this design, go for it. You could get it very cheap now. But yeah, I just think the bunny version was like more consistent, at least for my copy of it. And you might not have had those problems with her, but I did. So that's why I was a little a little disappointed. Just let me nitpick, okay? That's the point of the channel. I'm not here to just praise every single thing I buy. That would be boring. Very excited about her new figure though, the Shiramuku version. That one looks cute. If Katakawa messes that up, I'm probably gonna be pretty mad about that, but I have enough faith. The design's great. Let's look forward to it. But now we must talk about my least favorite figure of 2023. In fact, I would say I just hate this release, and that makes me so sad because I was very much looking forward to this, and it's from one of my favorite franchises of all time. It's not Xenoblade, it's not Toradora, it's not a Toho thing. No, none of that. What we're talking about is Nikaido by 3-0 from Dorohedoro. Now this should have been a banger figure, but unfortunately, it kind of sucks, but I'll give him some credit. The appearance of Nikaido is great. I love the weathering they did on the outfit, and she smells like a gas station, which I have to imagine is what the characters from this universe would smell like. That's not actually a compliment. These figures smell disgusting every time, but I don't really care about that. Yeah, I never made a review on this figure. I never unboxed her. I was going to, and then I just scrapped it because things went wrong. So I have no footage of her, and I really don't want to grab footage of her, but I do have her open. Just put her on the desk. She's probably not even going to stand. You might notice she's missing an arm, or rather a hand. And that's because the peg broke immediately as soon as I tried to swap the hands. I'm not a strong person. I also understand that figures can be pretty fragile when they have little joints and whatnot. So I was not applying much force, but immediately, not even trying to get it out, just pulling. A little bit, snapped immediately. Such a brittle joint, and it's stuck within her fist, so I can't get it out. I can't use that fist at all unless I get a drill and take it out, and it's not something I can do right now. So that sucks, but you might want to chalk that up to user error. That's fine, my fault. I still feel like it's the figure's problem. They included a bunch of joints for a reason, most likely. But yeah, figure also has a couple of other issues, like her ponytail. Can't get it in, no matter how hard I try. It just doesn't go into the tiny ball joint in the back of the optional head here. And it's really sharp too, so trying to apply force to the ponytail will just hurt. I've had this figure for months. I've never been able to put this onto her head, even with a hair dryer. It just makes the mask warp, so you have to be careful about that. But it just doesn't go on at all. Same with her tail, does not plug into the back of her, no matter how hard I try. Everything about this figure doesn't work. It's a posable figure with accessories, and she can't do anything with anything. It just sucks. All of it looks good. It's nicely painted. It's nicely sculpted. And like I said, the clothing is pretty damn impressive. And the articulation isn't even that bad, considering she's restricted a little bit by clothing. But for $150 plus shipping, plus the fact that every other figure does not have this problem in this line, and all I see is complaints about this figure from other users, so I know it's not just my fault. It's a common thing. It's really a shame. I do want them to continue to make figures in this line. I just hope that this doesn't happen again. And one day I will fix this, and I'll just leave her in a very static, boring pose, because that's all I can really do. But, you know what? Nobody else is making Dorohedoro stuff. So it's almost too bad. It's we're not worthy to get other figures besides the one from Figurama and the one from Prime 1 Studios, which are very expensive and kind of impossible to get at this point. So yeah, if you like Nikaido, this is kind of it. And that sucks. With that out of the way, let's continue on with our top 3. Now, like I said in the beginning, if you're a fan of this channel, you know what figures are coming up, but you might not know the order. So number 3 is going to have to go to Nia from Xenoblade 2. And that just hurts to say. She should have been number 1. Maybe in another year she would have been, but I just can't help but feel like not only are the figures above her a little bit better, but I also think that Good Smile Company messed up a little bit with her figure. Now, don't get it twisted. She's beautiful. This is a beautiful figure. It's very stunning. Love her paint job, love her sculpt. I think her face is very pretty, super accurate to Saitam's style. I like that they went with the blade form over the driver form. You might disagree, but I like the Shrine Maiden inspirations, the Kitsune stuff. It just is really eye-catching. It's probably, from a sculpt standpoint, the most impressive Xenoblade figure to date. But that does come at a slight cost. For one, she's so heavy that you have to support her hair, which I never realized how big her twin tails were in this form. It's no wonder that she needs acrylic support stands, and that does suck a little bit. It takes away from just like the visual appeal, but it's not that bad, and the other Xenoblade figures like Pyra and Mithra have stuff like that as well, so it's nothing new for the series, unfortunately. I kind of wanted to like praise this figure a little bit more before I got to the negatives, but I guess since we're on this track, let's continue on. Another thing that I feel like holds this figure back a little bit is her base. It's a great idea. It's a core crystal, which is a core component of Xenoblade 2, but there's so many better ways they could have went about designing the core crystal, because as it stands, it's just this very shallow, blue, hollow looking piece of plastic. It's like slightly translucent. But in my mind, there's two very obvious ways to improve this base. They could have, one, based it around Nia's core crystal, which is on her chest, which typically has this like blue and pinkish red color palette, kind of like swirling with each other. That would have looked very pretty. Or they could have designed it like the core crystals from the game and the artwork, where it has a bit more of a texture to it. As it stands, it's just not very inspired, but I will say it's better than Pyra or Mithra's bases, which really have nothing going for them. They're fine. They're not offensive or anything, but I do feel like Nia's is a little better at the very least. Mio's gonna get the best one though, so that's awesome. But the main issue with this figure for me, at least personally, is just her size. She is deceptively big. Like, she takes up way more space than Marine or Kurisu, and it just doesn't look like she should. But the way that she's holding her sword, as it extends all the way behind her, is so much further back than you might imagine that I have nowhere to put her. And I know that's a me problem, but that's, you know, my ranking. This is my ranking. This is where I put her because I can't enjoy this figure right now. She does fit in a DTOF, but you also can like barely fit her in there. You have to tilt her at a certain angle. And then, you know, you would probably want another Xenoblade figure next to her, but that's not the easiest thing. You can't really do that, at least in a clean way, or at least in the way I would like to. It's a beautiful sword though. I love that like stream of water and the flowers running through it. That like crystal clear blue is such a nice color, and it kind of shimmers. I think there's some like nice blue metallic paint on it. But man, the fact that I have a Xenoblade figure that I couldn't actually enjoy immediately and just put back in her box kind of goes to show you that like something went wrong for me, and that sucks because I feel like at this point, all I do is talk about Xenoblade when I can. This is like a stunner of a figure, could even be a centerpiece figure because of how nice the colors look, how clean the paint job is, the finishes of like the pearlescence of the hair and some gloss and some matte, really nicely balanced stuff, but it just has nowhere to go in my room right now, and that's whack. That is just so disappointing. So I really wish that they just gave us like an option to have her arm out without the sword. That would have solved everything, but it's glued onto her hand. You have to display her with the sword, otherwise you're going armless, and that's weird, so don't do that. I might be like a little bit off price-wise, but I believe she retailed for roughly 26,000 yen, and right now I can find her for 29,000 yen on AmiAmi, so not too big of an increase, but certainly didn't drop in price, which I kind of appreciate, honestly. I can't believe I forgot about this. Not to be crass, but those like crotch lines are so intense, just as intense as they were back when I reviewed this figure. Good Smile Company was cooking. They wanted to show that off. It's in the artwork, but usually they don't translate it like one-to-one like that in a figure. So kudos to them. But yeah, she's lovely. I love that graceful pose. Her hair is like probably better sculpted than entire figures, and there's two twin tails, so it's quite a lot of plastic, and it's a really nice color. Honestly, her entire palette is like exactly what I like, and I just love all the metallic paint used within this figure. It's gorgeous stuff. This is amazing. I like it a lot. Just wish a couple of things were changed. But let's move on. Number 2, let's talk about From Software. Now we actually have two I could talk about here. We have Oscar of Astora and Sekiro from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. And I had to decide which one was gonna fit in my number 2 spot, because I felt like it would have been a little lame if I put them back to back, take up some of the numbered slots. Didn't want to do that, so they're sharing a spot here. But ultimately, I'm gonna have to give it to Oscar of Astora from Dark Souls 1. It's just such a perfect figure and such a perfect representation of the Dark Souls series as a whole. It's a perfect representation of FromSoft as a whole. Just looking at this figure, looking at this armor set, it just invokes feelings of my journey playing this game for the first time when I built my first computer and I had no idea what I was doing in it. I was trash. I didn't even know how to like level up my character correctly. Didn't really use the blacksmith as much as I should. It was a struggle. Somehow I made it through, but those feelings and those memories are with me. And Gecko nailed it in terms of just like getting each and every little like chain link on the armor, the leather belts and whatnot, the pouches, the dirtiness of just like the metal plating and whatnot. It's like sublime, you know what I mean? Like it just nails everything it needs to. It's pretty damn big and it's very impressive to look at. And he also comes with a cute little friend, the crystal lizard, which I really like. He's got a cute little face. It's less about like the quality for me and more of just like the perfect representation of something that means so much to me, if that makes sense. But don't get it wrong, like, they absolutely killed it here. The weathering techniques throughout the entire armor design is just so impressive to me. Like, this level of fidelity is not something that I'm used to in other figures that I collect, and maybe that's on me for sticking to, you know, cartoony characters and whatnot, but it doesn't take away how impressive this, like, level of craftsmanship, like how worn down the clothes look, how lived in it all is. It just really makes it feel like this guy has been around for ages, and it's likely that he has been, considering the story of Dark Souls. And that holds true to Sekiro as well. Like, I don't want to say that that figure is not as impressive either. In some ways, it's even better than Oscar of Astora. Like, he's not wearing a helmet, so you get that full facial detail, the stubble of his beard, the scars, the imperfections, right? His glossy eyes. It's that next step into realism that it's kind of like out of this world. And then there's his clothing, of course, his orange kimono, the scarf, the stitching and the texture of the fabric and the tattered state of it all. And have you seen his prosthetic arm? Like, I can't even fathom how long it must have took to sculpt something this complex. Not to mention, his base is as cool as it gets. That rooftop of Ashina Castle, I believe, having that Oni face in the front, it wasn't as worn down as was advertised, which is part of why I didn't put him at the number 2 spot. I feel like Oscar didn't let me down at all from the promo photos, but Sekiro, because of the pandemic and whatnot, did miss a little bit of what they initially promised. But yeah, such a frustrating situation. Either be there on time, ready to spend hundreds of dollars, or wait it out and spend twice as much or even 3 times as much. Like, I don't know, that fear of missing out is so real, because if you like these games, you have to pre-order them immediately. But yeah, Oscar, perfect figure, like absolutely perfect, but there's only one more that I put above it. You know, I knew this figure was going to be pretty good when I saw it. When Alter announced that they were making Toho figures of all things, I got very excited. Back in 2011, Toho was one of the first franchises I ever bought figures for. Among some of my like first 5 were Flandre and Remelia from Griffin Enterprises. They're no longer around. I don't really recommend picking up their figures because they're okay, but they're so much better nowadays. But Alter, one of the best in the business, one of the best companies in Japan making figures right now, is going to be making Flandre and Remelia Scarlet. That was so cool to see. I didn't pre-order her immediately. I did have a little bit of hesitation just because of that price tag, but eventually I was like, all right, I have faith, they're gonna do good, and by golly gosh, they did good, because this is easily Flandre's best figure ever. In fact, I would go as far as to say that this is one of Alter's best figures of all time. And it's kind of funny because this is a bit of a redesign for Flandre. Typically her dress is much more simple and her wings have those like steel beams instead of those decrepit wings, which looks so much better. I really like the decrepit wooden wings instead of those black bars, whatever those are supposed to be. Makes her look like a Christmas tree. Still kind of does because of the colorful crystals, but this just looks so much more fitting for the character and her personality that I really dig it. But yeah, it's really not even like that radical of a change. They kept the primary colors red and white as they should be, but they added a little bit of yellow with the bow ties and some like golden trim on the edges of her dress, and it seems like they might have like emphasized the frilliness, but it feels very faithful, and it just shows the respect that the team had who were working on this figure for Flandre, the original artist and the sculptors and whatnot. Just felt like they really understood the character. And it's not just the outfit, I'm talking about the entire Flandre sculpt. Her personality, her demeanor, this pose is just so fitting. She has this level of like dainty fragility mixed in with this intense wickedness. It's very apparent as you look at her face. Those bright, menacing eyes are like some of the nicest eye decals I've ever seen. Love the color of them. Her face couldn't be better. Same goes for the hair sculpt. It is exquisitely sculpted. The individual strands kind of just like out of place, looks a little bit messy, but there's also like a bit of a flow to it as well, especially the side ponytail. Or side tail, that makes more sense. And the shading is just sublime. Everything about the paint job on this figure throughout the entire thing is super impressive. And we haven't even talked about the base, which is actually pretty complex. There's a lot going on down here. Now, her sister Remilia is also getting a base that is nearly identical to this, but because Flandre is the more unhinged of the two sisters, her base is starting to fall apart. The stained glass behind her is shattered, and that stone checkerboard is starting to crumble. And I actually really like this. It's almost like a reflection of her personality. But if that wasn't enough for you, I don't know how it wouldn't be. I think that's kind of ridiculous. There's so much going on in this figure. She's also floating above a bed of roses, and those roses have some thorns that are like erratically circling the base. It's such a neat visual. The colors that it brings, it's so lush and vibrant and vivid. I adore it. But yeah, easily one of the best figures that I own, and it's unfortunate that for once an alter figure is like twice the price on the aftermarket. Not nearly twice, but she's about like 53 to 55,000 yen. That's crazy. I did not see that coming. Sometimes Toho figures do jump in price. A lot of the time though they don't. Really feels like a crapshoot. And, you know, Altered, I feel like most of their figures do hit the bargain bin. I think they make way too many of them. But this figure probably wasn't worth it for them. This was a very intricate, heavily detailed figure that they weren't willing to make a bunch to put on like store shelves and whatnot. Just make as much as they needed to, and then a little bit more on top of that in case people missed out. But I do feel like eventually they will re-release this. I feel like they're pretty good about that as a company, but we've never seen them, you know, tackle the Toho series before, so I can't promise that. Unfortunately, have no idea. But I would say, considering the quality of Flandre, if you like this franchise, absolutely pick up their Remilia, which is coming out in June. So yeah, that's going to do it. That's my top 5 for 2023. I feel like 2024 has a lot of like expectations considering how good this year was for me. But I'm also not really buying as much as I was in 2023. In fact, you're going to see a lot of figures that I never got a chance to talk about in the upcoming months. Maybe not like a ton, but certainly a handful that I really need to make some videos on, including some Toho figures. From Good Small Company, you probably know the ones back in like 2022. I'm bad when it comes to not making videos that I should in a timely manner, but I'll get around to it, I swear. There's just not a reason to. Nobody cares about these figures, but I gotta do that eventually. Either way, let me know how your guys' 2023 was. Let me know what you're looking forward to in the coming year. And yeah, appreciate you guys stopping by. If you want to support the channel, sub, like, etc. You get the picture. Either way, I'll see you around. Thanks for watching, and take care. Later.